Windows Server 2008 has a new feature and an enhanced feature called Windows Deployment Services. You can install the Windows Deployment Services role by going to Server Manager and going to Roles and clicking Add Role. But before we install the Windows Deployment Services role, we need to first create a DHCP server. So in this instance, we're going to go ahead first and create a DHCP server on our WDS server. We're going to go ahead and check the DHCP server role. We're going to specify which network card will be listening and handing out IP addresses. Our parent domain will be test.local. Our DNS server is 10.10.10.2. Now you notice the beauty of the new Add Roles wizard, which allows you to actually configure some of the initial settings of the roles you're installing instead of adding the role and then having to configure them later. We don't want to use WINS in our network. We're going to go ahead and add a scope. We're going to call it WDS Test Out. We're going to start at 10.10.10.100 and we're going to end at 10.10.10.150. Our mask will be a 24-bit mask or 255, 255, 255, 0. We're going to leave the gateway empty. We're going to leave it at the default 6-day lease duration, and we want to make sure our scope is activated. We're going to disable DHCP version 6 for now, as we're not going to be working with it. And the last option is we're going to make sure that our DHCP server is authorized in Active Directory by specifying a proper enterprise administrator account that can authorize this DHCP server in Active Directory. So we're going to go ahead and click Next and install and wait for our DHCP server role to be installed and configured. So once the DHCP server role has been properly installed, we're going to just go ahead and check to make sure that all the configurations that we entered are done properly. We're going to go ahead and open up the DHCP console. We're going to open up WDS1, IP version 4. We'll notice that the green up arrow means that our DHCP server has been properly authorized. And then we can view the scope that we just created, and we can see that the proper address pool has been configured also. You can highlight the scope options to see that options 006 and 015 have properly been configured also. So now we're going to go ahead and add the WDS role. We're going to go back to Server Manager, click Add Roles. You can, by the way, check this box so the screen doesn't pop up every time you click Add Roles. This time we're going to go ahead and check the box for Windows Deployment Services, or WDS. First thing you have to make sure is that both the deployment server and the transport server are chosen. The deployment server takes care of the image management of your Windows images, and the transport server takes care of the transportation or moving of the images through multicast or unicast to your environment. And go ahead and click Install. And as you see, installing the WDS role is a very simple process. Once the installation of the WDS role has been completed, you can go ahead and click Close. And now we can go to Administrative Tools and open up the WDS console. When we open up the WDS console, we'll notice that we can see our servers, and we'll see that the WDS has an exclamation mark mentioning that it has to be configured. So we can go ahead and right-click our WDS and say Configure Server. The first thing that will happen is it's going to ask us where we want to store our actual image files. So once we start configuring different images and we start downloading or uploading these images, they need to be stored on an NTFS partition, especially with enough space. The thing you want to make sure is that it's recommended not to store your images on the same partition as your system or operating system installation. Right now we don't have any other partition, so we're just going to go ahead and choose the C drive. And we get a message talking about how it's best to be installed on a separate volume or disk. I'm just going to say yes to go ahead. Now, because our WDS server and DHCP server are both on the same operating system installation, we need to make sure that we check both boxes. This way, it will allow our DHCP server and WDS server to work hand in hand. The next option is to whether to respond to Pixie clients, respond to only clients that are known, which means they're in Active Directory, or respond to all clients. Now, if you do choose respond to all clients, those that are known, which are members of Active Directory, will automatically get a response and the image will get pushed down to them. But if you want, you can check this box here to specify for the clients that are unknown and that are not a member of your Active Directory environment, they will actually go into a pending folder where an administrator must come and approve their image installation. Until an administrator does not approve that installation, the image will not get pushed down to that client. For the purpose of our practice, we'll leave it as is, so all of our known clients can get their images, and all of our unknown clients will have to wait for approval. So now our WDS server is getting configured. The WDS installation wizard will now actually ask us if we want to start to install and upload any images. We can go ahead and choose this option, but there's one small issue with it. When we do choose and allow WDS to do the image uploading through the wizard, it will upload all the available images on the media we give it. So for example, if you give a Windows Server 2008 media and you want to upload the images off of it, it will upload all 6 images, which could take quite a while. Because we want to only manage or maybe install 1 or 2 images, we can actually uncheck this box right now and go ahead and manually upload the images we want as we move forward. So the first step in configuring a WDS server is to upload an install image. An install image is an image that stores the installation, the operating system files. We're going to go ahead and right-click Install Images and say Add Install Image. It's going to ask us to create a new image group. We're going to go ahead and say Server 2008. It's going to ask us for the install.wim file. So we're going to go ahead and insert our Windows Server 2008 DVD. And we're going to go ahead to My Computer, open the drive, go to the Sources folder, and choose install.wim. When we click Next, we are actually given an option to choose which of the installations and the editions we want to upload to our WDS server. Now, if we had gone through the regular configuration wizard prior to this, it would have added all 6. But for the practice we're doing right now, we're just going to go ahead and have the Windows Longhorn or Server 2008 Standard Edition uploaded. Go ahead and click Next, and wait for the image to be uploaded. Once the image uploading is complete, under our installed images, under the Server 2008 image group, we will see that we have our Windows Longhorn Server Standard image uploaded. Notice the architecture is 32-bit. We obviously inserted a 32-bit installation DVD. Now, this is the first part. The second part to properly configuring WDS is to upload a boot image. Now, the boot image are the actual files that will help the desktop or the computer that does not have an operating system boot up into a Windows environment that has the network drivers and everything, to then connect to the WDS server and download the proper image. So we're going to go ahead and right-click Boot Images and add Boot Image. Luckily, the Windows Server 2008 DVD already has a boot image for us, and we're going to go ahead and just choose the same one. And click Open, then click Next. We can go ahead and give it a name if we want, or we can just leave it as is. We're going to call it Windows Server 2008 x86. We're going to give it a description of the same. We're going to click Next and Next again to have the boot image uploaded to our WDS server. Once the boot image has been uploaded, we can see under Boot Images that we have our Windows Server 2008 32-bit architecture boot image available. Now, once this is complete, we can go ahead and actually create a multicast transmission. Now, there are 2 ways to do that. We can either come to Multicast Transmissions, right-click and say Create a Multicast Transmission, or we can go under our image groups, right-click the image we want to create a transmission from, and say Create Multicast Transmission. We can give the transmission a friendly name, Server 2008 Standard. Now we can specify it's going to be a autocast, which will automatically start when a client connects, or a scheduled cast. Here we can specify either to start the imaging after a certain number of computers have connected, or after a certain time has passed. In this instance, we'll just do a scheduled cast if 10 computers connect. Go ahead and click Next and Finish, and now our multicast session has been created and ready waiting. Once our 10 clients connect, you're going to see their addresses, MAC addresses, and the information about their transfers. Also, as you remembered, if any device is unknown, meaning they're not a member of Active Directory, once they connect, their computer object will actually pop up over here. Then a system administrator must come, right-click their object, and approve or reject their installation. Now, this was a downwards process. We only covered how to push an image down to WDS. What if there was an operating system or a server that you wanted to save their image up to WDS server? That term is called capture. To capture a server, we have to create a capture image. Capture images are made off of the original boot image. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and right-click our Windows Server 2008 boot image and say Create Capture Boot Image. We can give it a name and specify capture so we know it's a capture image and not a regular boot image. And we're going to save it to a location. Let's save it by default to the standard location where everywhere else has it, under Remote Install. Under Boot, let's call it right under here, Capture. We're going to save it. Once a capture image creation is complete, we'll notice that we still have to manually add it to our boot images. So we're going to go ahead and right-click Boot Images and add a boot image. We're going to browse to the location where we saved it, choose the capture image, click Next, obviously the same description as we put when we created it. We're going to have it uploaded to our WDS server. Once the upload is complete, we can now see that we have our boot image, which allows us to boot a desktop or machine or server up into a Windows environment to then install an image. Or we can then have the capture image, which allows the same process as the boot image. The only difference is that the capture image will take the image off the machine and save it up to an image file. The next thing we want to look at is, what about a machine that is not PXE compliant, meaning that it does not have a PXE network card that will allow it to boot off the network? For that purpose, we have something called a Discover image. Same process as a capture image. If we right-click the original boot image and say Create Discover Boot Image, it will create an image file for us that we then have to export to a media like a CD or DVD, then use that media to boot the machine up so it will allow the network drivers and all the other drivers needed loaded and allow that machine to boot off of a standard boot image to then install an install image. There are a few extra settings that we can take a look at under the properties of our WDS server. Under PXE Response, as we spoke about, you can configure the Do Not Respond, Respond Only, or Respond to All Known and Unknowns. You can also configure a delay. So for example, if you don't want imaging to happen instantaneously, you can configure a delay in a number of seconds from the time a PXE response has happened to the time an image starts to roll down. Under Directory Services, we can even specify the name of the client. We can have a standard name generated for us. We can have the computer joined to a domain. The same domain as our WDS server, same domain as the user who's running the WDS server, or even place the computer into the same OU as a WDS server, or a custom location. Under Boot, we see the default boot programs that are used to boot our machines to connect to WDS. Now by default, when you do use these default boot images, you're asked to press F12 to actually boot into WDS. If you want to get rid of the F12 prompt, you can go ahead and click Browse and choose the boot file with the N12 at the end. So if you notice, the regular pixieboot.com will ask you for press F12, but if you choose the pixieboot.n12 boot file, you will not be asked, or in a way N12 as in no 12, you will not be asked to press F12 to boot up into WDS. Under the Client tab, we can even add or specify the unattended file we want to be used for the installation. Under DHCP, we can recheck or reconfigure the DHCP options. So in summary, with the use of WDS, we can deploy install images that are already created for us, or we can capture images off of a machine and deploy to other machines using a capture image.